Welcome back to MVM, the show where we talk about all things board game related. Today we're excited to bring you a Kickstarter preview. This is for the 6th game in the Tiny Epic series from Gamelyn Games. It's called Tiny Epic Zombies, and this has a lot of different modes. There's 5 different ways to play this one, David.
Yeah, there are 5 different ways. We've mostly played in the cooperative front. You can play this full co-op, and you can also play it cooperatively with one zombie player, so it kind of turns it into a one versus many. You can also play it competitively with a zombie player. And then finally, you can play this thing solo.
Yep. So what's going on in this game? The end of the world has come, zombies have invaded, and where do you go?
The mall.
To the mall, to the courtyard. So what happens in this game is that you've barricaded yourselves into the courtyard with a number of survivors, that number being 2, and you're trying to keep those survivors alive.
And yourself.
And yourself. And you're trying to complete 3 scenarios. So no matter what of those 5 modes you're trying to play, you're trying to complete 3 scenarios, and those scenarios can vary from game to game.
Yeah, there's a big stack of scenarios, and you're going to take 3 of them randomly at the beginning of the game and set those things out. Right here in front of us, we have Escape the Mall, which is basically trying to get to the exits. Discover a cure, we have to collect a bunch of information to figure out what that cure is, and in a certain order. And then, of course, fix a helicopter. So once we get out, we have to have the helicopter fixed so we can get out of town.
Now, what you're seeing here is a prototype. I'm sure a lot of the things will change within the final product. So when you're looking at these components, don't think this is what you're actually going to get.
Right.
Also, we're going to talk about most of the components in the game. We're going to talk about the actual mall itself, what all these different stores do, but I want to first start with the characters. Each player is going to start with one particular character in front of them. That character is going to give them a very specific player power from the very beginning of the game. But what is similar for all players is that each player is going to start with a knife and a pistol, which allows them to do melee damage or range damage. But they're also going to have a track across the top of their board that has a 0 health marker and then 9 ammo. If those 2 markers ever meet and touch each other, that player dies and then becomes a zombie for the zombie player to use that special ability for the rest of the games.
Right, and even if you're not playing with a zombie player, that card gets flipped and it becomes effectively another effect for the sort of AI to inflict upon you.
Right, so the mall itself, as you notice, the courtyard is in the center. It starts with a 2 barricade, and if that ever gets down to 0, the zombies have busted through and you lose a survivor. You're trying to keep that barricade up. And around the courtyard, you have a number of different stores. Each of these cards is one store that's broken into 3 distinct rooms. Each of these rooms may or may not have special actions that are involved with that portion of the room itself. But every single store has an entrance, and that's where zombies will bust through the wall and start to make their way into the courtyard itself.
Yeah, and Jeremy mentioned there's a lot of actions in these rooms too. So depending on what store you're in, you might find an action that you can take to find a bullet. Or to sometimes do very, very specific and unique things like find a motorcycle so that your next turn allows you to move much further than normally.
Yep. You're also going to notice a variety of different tokens. These tokens reflect very specifically to the scenarios that you're playing. Each of these rooms may have icons on them that say certain tokens are placed on them. You may not even see those icons being used unless you have very specific scenarios that you're trying to complete. Each of these different scenarios is double-sided, meaning that one side is used for a cooperative and then one's used for any kind of zombie player that may be participating as well. How does the game end? Actually, there's a couple different ways that the game can end. If the players complete all 3 of the scenarios, they've made it out of the mall and they've survived.
You've won. That's the one-win condition.
You can lose, though, in a variety of different ways. If the barricade gets broken down and there's no more survivors left, you lose. Also, there is a stack of 24 cards here. Again, this doesn't matter which mode of playing you're going through. If this stack of cards is depleted, each player gets 1 more turn, and if they haven't completed those scenarios, you lose.
Right.
So to start the game, each player starts within the actual courtyard itself. You place your 2 survivors and you place a number on the barricade. And then you're going to spawn 1 zombie in each of these different entrances around the board itself. These are kind of the starting locations for those zombies. Now it needs to be noted that zombies are going to move across a very specific path going into the courtyard, and those are designated by arrows that are on the different rooms themselves.
Right, and what Jeremy means by move in that case is they're going to spread really. So these zombie pieces aren't necessarily going to move too much, but when zombies are spawned, if a zombie gets spawned in the same location that already has one, you just put it into the next room. So they kind of grow
like
more
a horde,
and more, just like a zombie horde, until they reach your barricade.
So the game is extremely simple to play. On your turn, you're basically taking 3 movement actions. After each movement, you're allowed to do a variety of actions after that. But you have to move first. That's very important. You can't do any kind of combat before you move.
No, you don't want to stay in one place when you're in a mall full of zombies.
Absolutely. So movement takes place from room to room. Now, you're going to see a variety of different white walls in here. You want to talk about those because they can be very misleading when you first look at the game.
Yeah, it's a very interesting game. Movement is very free form in this game. You have to imagine there's probably walls that have a lot of rubble in them. So adjacency is what dictates movement. And 2 rooms are adjacent in this game if they share one wall. So effectively, you can move through a wall into the next room, even though there may not be a doorway there. The doorways on these rooms and the archways are
for zombie
more
movement.
for flavor and more for that zombie spreading.
The courtyard itself has 5 different spaces, a central space, and then 1 space around it, and each of these different stores has 3 rooms. As I said, on your turn, you're allowed 3 movements. So my first movement could go into a room, and then my second could go here. Now, once you move, you're allowed to do a variety of things after that, but it's very important to note you can't take any actions if there's a zombie anywhere in that store, not just in the room you're in, but in the store itself. When you move into a room with a zombie, you can either do melee or ranged combat. Melee, you have to be in the same room. Ranged combat, you have to be in an adjacent room. You can't do a ranged when you're in the same room as that.
Exactly, and when you do melee combat, let's say you move into a room that has a zombie. You're going to take the melee die and roll this to determine what happens. Now here's the good news. You're going to kill the zombie. Every time in melee combat you'll kill the zombie.
Even in ranged combat, they're always going to die.
Even in ranged combat. But this is all about how much damage you might take. You could take 2 damage, you could take 1 damage. There's 1 space that just simply kills the zombie.
Yep.
And then the really special space is the overkill space. This is going to let you kill the zombie, but then it gives you an additional movement right after you've killed it.
You can also expend 1 of your ammo across the top to shoot range combat into the adjacent room. If the entire room is cleared out, you are then allowed to do a search ability on that room. As we said, each of these different rooms within the store may or may not have a special ability, like collecting ammo. Also, you're going to notice a variety of different tokens on here. You can interact with those tokens trying to complete scenarios. A lot of these scenarios are based on when you flip the token, if it comes in a very specific order, and then getting those and bringing them back to the courtyard to possibly fix a helicopter and whatnot.
Right, and it might sound easy. It might sound like you're moving into a store, you're meleeing, ranging, and shooting. That's not the case. You move into one of the rooms of that store, you get to, after that movement, do 1 melee or 1 ranged attack.
Kill 1 zombie only.
And then do 1 interaction. So there may be a room that has a token that you need to flip. It might have an action you want to take. You've got to make choices. So then once you've made those choices, then you take your next movement and rinse and repeat. You might be able to kill another zombie. You might be able to take an action.
The real trick is trying to pull off those actions in rooms that don't have zombies.
Right.
Because as the board starts to flood with zombies, you're locked out from doing anything in that store until you remove the threat. So at the end of a player's turn, once he takes all 3 of his movements and the actions after each of those movements, he is allowed to actually search the room. That's what it's called. To search the room, each player at the start of the game is going to have 1 face-down card in front of them. They're not allowed to look at that card. When they flip it up, it's going to be an item of some sort or a special event. That they're not getting this card.
No.
They're just enacting the icon in the upper left-hand corner. This icon is going to refer to 2 stores within this mall itself. That's where the zombies are going to grow and expand.
And this is kind of interesting because this is one of the big differences between the fully co-op and the 1 versus many game. When this happens in a co-op game, you simply place 2 zombies in each, one zombie in each of those 2 rooms. If there's a zombie player, they can choose whether they want to do that, or they can place both of the zombies in one of those 2 rooms, thereby increasing their spread towards the barricade.
And staying away from the players.
Right.
And that way they can get into the courtyard itself. The other thing that's going to happen is they're going to take this card and they're going to put it face up adjacent to the room that they ended their turn in. What that means is they've searched and rummaged through the room, possibly made some noise, and then they find something, but the players in future turns are allowed to collect the item at the end of their turn. But again, they can only collect things if that room is empty of zombies.
Yeah, that's probably the one good thing from these cards. One more bad thing from these cards is if when those zombies are spawned, you find yourself in the room with one of those new zombies, you've been overrun.
Yeah.
And you're going to immediately take a damage no matter what. You can't do anything about that. You can't fight back right then. On your next turn, the first thing you have to do is move out of that room. Now, you can move out of that room and then range attack them, but you need to get away from that zombie first and foremost.
That's one of the cool things about the one versus many as well, is that the zombie player has the opportunity of making those overruns happen a lot more strategically because he's deciding. Now, at the end of the player's turn, once he flips that card up, spawns zombies, he's going to take a new card. As we said, there's 24 cards in this deck, so this is a built-in timer. The cool thing about this is that in a one versus many, the zombie player actually is going to have a hand of these, and he gives a card to the player. So he can set up rooms to be kind of ambushes, or if players are skipping a tire section, he can start to flood that part of the board with zombies.
Right, it really makes the role of the zombie player a lot more interesting than you might think at first.
Yep.
It's not just someone who's sort of facilitating the game. That one element really gives them some strategy, and as Jeremy said before, choosing where to spawn your zombies to makes it a really good game in and of itself.
Yeah, the other cool thing that you'll notice is when you flip up this card, if it is the same icon of the room that you're in, that creates noise, and it gives the zombie player even more abilities. He gets one of two choices. Not only is he going to put zombies in those rooms, but then he has the opportunity of moving a zombie, which is typically not going to happen. Or he can look at the back of his card and take the lowest action and then move up. These are special powers that that zombie player has. As he kills more players around the table, he's going to collect more of these cards, meaning he's going to have more special abilities in the course of the game. You're basically going to do this round after round until the cards are gone, until the barricade falls, or until the players complete these three very specific scenarios. So a very cool game, a variety of different ways that you can play this one. As we said, we played this one cooperatively, and it's very cool, but the cooperative versus the zombie player is really neat because they can kind of make a choice on where these zombies are going to spawn and then avoid the players to be able to interact with them in specific ways.
Right, and these scenarios are really cool too. You might think that you're just collecting the tokens that are needed for those. They work in so many different ways that it's not the case. Some of them you need to collect tokens in the right order. So if you flip one in the wrong order, it just goes flipped back over and you have to remember where that is. There's some others that you collect. Once you have all of them, the last two that you find for the exits scenario dictates the room or rooms in which you can actually escape at the end.
Yeah. So what we can't show you is all the different stretch goals, and we've seen a lot of them.
Yeah.
All of these different stores have double-sided cards, which give new effects, new abilities. There's a ton of new characters you can play, a lot of new scenarios, items that you can use. There's even item Meeples, which came out with tiny epic quests that'll be used to clip onto these characters to represent the different items that you're going to be using.
Yeah, there's a lot of game in here. Like Jeremy said, it starts with 5 different ways to play, and then with all of the different things you've got going on here, the game's going to feel quite different every time.
If you guys have any questions, make them in the comments below. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
This Kickstarter preview has been brought to you by Man vs. Meeple in sponsorship with Quartermaster Logistics. Take a look at all of their fulfillment solutions at qmlogistics.com.